to then Secretary of State Colin Powell. Colonel, let's start with the Hitler comment, which we don't have to talk about the sort of trajectory of the historical clumsiness and apology. But to me, what was striking is this was pretty clearly a talking point. The president himself in an interview is talking about the worst mass murderers haven't used chemical weapons in this way, which is the kind of rhetoric you normally associate with justifications for escalation into a military conflict.
I'm very concerned by that very aspect of it. Let me just say that I think Scott Spicer is kept around because he makes Donald Trump look good. I wouldn't expect him to depart on that basis alone. The White House is looking so bad that Scott Spicer actually makes our president look good. With regard to some of the remarks about the more visible threats in the world, North Korea being preeminent perhaps right now, from what Secretary Tillerson has said, from what the president has said, from what allegedly transpired in Florida with President Xi, I see so much rank amateurism at work here. Just your remarks about the Easter ceremony and no one being notified, it's clearly indicative of a White House that not only is low on people, it's low on experience and talent. They can't seem to even manage the grounds of the White House, let alone such significant issues as Russia and Syria and North Korea and on and on.
One challenge has been just simple coordination on what exactly the Syria policy is. And it does seem today that they approach something closer to a consensus. You had Secretary of State Mattis saying this was about chemical weapons and reinforcing the sort of taboo and norm and international law against them. The president sort of basically saying something like that as well. Do you feel like they've arrived at some coherent policy on Syria?
I certainly hope so, but let's just look at some of the things they've been saying, Chris. They've been trying to blame Russia, for example, for irresponsibility in the destruction of Syria's chemical weapon stocks. I'm sorry. The United States Army and its contractors destroyed 600 metric tons in 42 days of CW stocks. The OPCW and the United Nations were responsible for that. And as far as I can tell, they did a pretty thorough job. So why blame Russia? They don't even know their facts. Now, Syria might have kept some sarin, some VX, or some other chemicals aside. There's no doubt that they could have done that. But this is ridiculous. The inexpertise, the amateurism, and the lack of fact-checking that's going on even with people like Jim Mattis.
You know, there's also, Jim Mattis also had to sort of apologize today because he had said that we took out 20% of the fixed-wing planes that they had, which was not true.
Took out 20, yes.
Right, which is different, obviously, unless the denominator is 100. But here's my question to you. I mean, we also have this Tillerson question about Ukraine, right, at the meeting of foreign ministers. And again, this real sense that the foreign policy of this government is essentially up for grabs for whoever who sort of moves first or most strongly in the public eye. And what that means for other states that are attempting to make strategic judgments about how to interact with us.
It means that they're terribly confused, including our most prominent allies in the world. We don't know, they don't know exactly what's going to happen at any given time. I remember very vividly how this happened with the Bush administration in the first term when Dick Cheney was more or less running everything, and no one knew what was going to come out until Dick had made up his mind. This was very disconcerting for our allies. Well, at least Mr. Cheney was competent, experienced, and an extremely good bureaucrat. This is amateurism, and amateurism looks to the world just like what it is, amateurism.
Colonel, do you think that there's any danger now of escalation in Syria if, for instance, there's evidence of more chemical weapons attacks, that essentially a line's been drawn that has to now be backed up no matter what?
I think we can take Mr. Putin at his word. There are going to be, I think he said, more fake chemical attacks. And I don't take that as disingenuously as maybe other Americans do, because I have seen no intelligence that convinces me that the provenance of those attacks in Idlib province were, in fact, was in fact the Syrian government. So I'm really worried about this. And I know, Chris, that we're already committing forces in Syria that we weren't committing before. The rules of engagement have changed. You may have seen above the fold left side, Washington Post first front page this morning, you had active duty Army actually saying that the changed rules of engagement are killing more civilians around Mosul and other places. So again, I don't see any coherence developing here, even though I understand the military's in charge of the strategy. I really don't see coherence yet.
All right, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, thank you.
Thank you.
Joining me now, Katrina